Okay. Let's start this week with a little coherent breathing for maybe, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes, and we can just start to all get in sync. So, in order to do so, you might find somewhere that's comfortable to sit, or if you have the opportunity to lay down, you can keep your eyes open. Obviously, if you're like driving or doing something that requires to keep your eyes open, because this breathing protocol is pretty simple. It's just going to be a 5 second inhale with a 5 second exhale. So you can definitely do it as you're walking down the street, driving. If you are able to listen to a podcast, you are able to come along on this little breathing journey. And I'm going to use my Kimball as the timer. So when you hear, a sound like, that'll signify an inhale, and then the next one might be, and that'd be the exhale. So to prepare, you can just exhale all of the air out of your lungs, come into a relaxed mindset. We'll be here for like one more minute. Okay, you can start to Maybe open your eyes if they were closed. Return to your normal breathing pattern, which I would assume to be a little more relaxed than it was just a couple minutes ago. And so last week we talked about a little bit about Hertz frequencies, and that Hertz frequency would give us, a vibrational pattern of like 1/10.1 because it's one full breath every 10 seconds. Switching back, okay, now we've got the mic back in the spatula, and we're just gonna keep rolling. But that's just a nice little breath that you could incorporate really any time of the day. Just 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, working to get the breath somewhere down into the stomach. Avoid the chest breathing. Chest breathing just leads to, more inherent stress. But, we can shift gears a little bit and just get into it. We start with the question from last week, which might have been phrased differently, but the question was, how does memory or experience shift when you're recalling a moment of flow? So for me, when I thought about that question, it was like, when I think back to moments where I'm playing and I'm in a flow state, do I remember them more clearly, or is it more of like a blur? And it definitely is always more of a blur. I think of like weeks or a week in the past where I was really playing in a flow state. Like I can recall the dates. For instance, it might be like the Junior College World Series would be one. That was probably like 10 days. 10 days of just like flow. And the whole thing is like one tornado of an experience, like a smooth tornado, but it's not, I recall certain things vividly, but not like the entire experience. Where I think sometimes when I'm not in a flow state and it's a little more of a grind, like I recall it better because, I don't know why. I think just when you're in that flow state, it's like there's no thinking. So it's harder to remember because there's no thinking. You're not taking anything in. You're just moving moment by moment. And so I just thought that was an interesting question because when I've always looked back on it, especially like in baseball and playing, when I'm in that flow state, it's always harder to recall. Someone might be like, "Oh, do you remember this?" And I find myself oftentimes just being like, "No, I don't. I don't at all." And I never know if that means I was more present or less present. Either way, it just means I don't remember it that well. But I'd be interested as you start to recall moments where you're in flow, not even in athletics, but just like in life, do you remember it better or worse? It's kind of like when you're driving from one place to another, and it could be a place like to work and home, a route that you know really well, and you get to work or you get back home and you're like, I don't even remember stopping at the stop sign. But also you were doing it and you weren't thinking of anything else. Wouldn't that be flow? Like you're in that flow state right there in the car and you don't remember any of what just happened. I think everyone's been there a couple times. You get home and you're like, how did I just like teleport? Or how did I not just like run somebody over? I was, so you're like present but not present. And that's kind of like that space of nothingness, which is flow in itself. You're just moving one after the next. And it's pretty awesome because time doesn't exist in those moments. You're just like, it's a liminal state. You're in a state of just nothing. So that was, recalling on the question from last week, and I guess we can go right into the observation of the week, which is, I think I'm going to make it the graphic for this week's episode, but so obviously I've mentioned it. outside of my window is like a little soccer field. I mean, I'm watching kids play soccer right now. There's probably like 10 of them out there. And there's usually always somebody out there. And this actually happened last night. There were two grown men. Like, I'm probably 30, 40, I don't know. And the goal that you would shoot into is like, it's metal and it's kind of like a cage and it's much smaller. I mean, it's probably 8 feet wide by like 8 feet tall. So, pretty small goal compared to what it actually is. Damn, I'm watching a guy dribble a soccer ball with a baby in his arms. And he's good. 1, 2, way up there. Damn. That's pretty cool. He's got a baby in his left arm and he's just dribbling the soccer ball with his feet like it's nothing. He could probably be cooking up some scrambled eggs at the same time too. Nice. Well, these grown men did not have a baby with them. And they were probably like 10 feet away from one another. And one of them would back up and line up a penalty shot. And not like he was trying to score the goal by any means. He was just kicking it as hard as he could at his friend. And the friend wasn't even trying to block the shot. He was more just like absorbing it with his body. Then the ball would go somewhere else. And then the guy who was just the goalie would go get the ball. He'd line up his penalty shot from 10 feet away, if that, and just kick it as hard as he could at his friend. And these are not like athletic individuals. This guy gives you a little visual of what I was watching. But it was one after another. They would just go back and forth, just pounding penalty shots at one another. Not really like talking. Like, I watched one of the shots get taken, and a guy, he kicked it at his buddy. His buddy was on the phone and just wore it in his shin. The ball went flying, and he went go get it and kicked the next one at him. Like, it was, I don't know, maybe they like had an argument or something. Like, all right, like, we got to take it to the soccer field now and just get it out on each other. But I mean, I thought that was just hilarious. I've never seen that before. Two grown men from like 10 feet away just ringing soccer balls at one another. I mean, there was no point to that observation other than it was just funny. Oh, the wife cannot dribble the soccer ball as well as her husband. I mean, that's one way to get your kid to think that you're cool. Nice. Well, we're kind of cooking, so we'll just keep on moving right along. The word for this week was intuition. Intuition, which is a word that I've been thinking about for a couple weeks now. As far as like, where does it come from? The two definitions I found for intuition. One, the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. Okay, and 2, a thing that one knows or considers likely from instinctive feeling rather than rational thought. Okay, so if we look at those two definitions, the parts that stand out to me immediately are with number 1, without the need for conscious reasoning, and number 2, likely from instinctive feeling rather than rational thought. Okay, so with these definitions and with that like takeaway, intuition comes from the body, somewhere in the body. And I think maybe it's different for everybody. For me, my intuition comes from like my solar plexus, like the middle of my chest is where I like feel like that whenever I'm like drawn somewhere or to someone or something, it's like draws me from that area right there. It's like, and then you just go with it. And I think we're all born with like some level of intuition. And then you have the opportunity to nurture that intuition as life continues to unfold. And nurturing that intuition would look like trusting it, following through on the intuition with action. And through that, your communication or your ability to work with your own intuition grows stronger because you're able to find it much easier. And it's like intuition, if intuition has intuition's like, oh, well, if you're actually gonna listen to me, here I am. But if you just choose to ignore intuition one after another, it's gonna just sink so deep that when you really need it, it's not there. It really works as a magnet. It's the same magnet that repels you from other people, places, or things. You could be drawn. It's like when you put, sometimes I don't know how it works, but you put magnets towards one another and they don't connect. They do the opposite. It's like that. I used to have really strong magnets back when I was a kid. Those were always fun. I like the sound of when two magnets click against one another. But intuition is just this organic process. And to go against it, to fight against it, just you're creating friction that's not necessary. That's not organic, because intuition is taking you to an organic place. And it's not always going to lead you towards like what is the most instant gratification. And I think that could be the reason why people choose to ignore intuition after some time, because they're like, oh, it's not giving, it's the immediate high I want. So then you choose to ignore it, and then you use your conscious reasoning, and then it's just never as fun. Never as fun and like too calculated. I prefer to live by intuition. And it's a choice to ignore your intuition. And when you say choice, it's like, oh, well, intuition never leaves you. Yeah, it's going to bury itself deep down because you don't listen to it. You don't follow through with it. It's the same. I think sports help foster stronger intuitions in individuals, because like for baseball, it's like you could use the analogy of like, oh, when you're hitting, your intuition tells you what pitch might be coming next or how he's going to pitch you or whatever. Then your conscious brain, your ego might come in and be like, no, dude, he's going to throw you this, this, and this because of this. And you look back and you're like, oh, if I would have, and the phrase is always, if I would have just trusted myself. Okay, well, trusting myself is listening to my intuition. And that's like the best players I've ever played with use like zero conscious reasoning, or zero rational thought when they're playing. It's just felt. Like they're explaining things at such a high level as far as like, oh, I'm going to look for this pitch off of this guy because of this. And it's like a felt feeling because I feel that he's going to do this. And yeah, there's some like reasoning to back it up, but like that's their intuition working. And that's kind of as deep as it goes. And then they just trust it and they go. There's no like secondary conscious reasoning coming in, trying to be like, no, think of this or this. And it's like those players with the strongest intuition, the whole game the whole game just becomes a meditative experience. And maybe for some players, it's just unrealized because that's so natural to them. Their intuition is so strong that that's the only way they know how to play the game. And damn, that has to be fun to combine like high elite level skills with high elite level intuition. I mean, that's where you get elite players, essentially. And it just becomes this whole frictionless state of flow, which, that's a small percentage of players across, call it baseball. That's a tiny percentage of players Okay, so how do the other 99% fit into this realm of, we'll call it professional baseball? Well, I think that's where like meditation or breath work comes into play, because as you experienced earlier at the start of this episode, through the coherent breathing, okay, I gave you an auditory response, which was the instrument, and then you also had the action, which was the breath. And those two things combined, I would assume, you can let me know, I would assume took you right outside of your head. Because you just listen for the sound, inhale, sound, exhale. Sound, inhale, sound, exhale. And the more that you do that, the more that you practice that, creating internal space, like a healthy internal ecosystem within your body, the more the game just becomes an experience of flow. And that's definitely what I've found, since I went out to Australia and then playing out here and then deepening my own practice within breath work, meditation, all of those, holistic modalities, is that the game just becomes one experience of flow. You get so caught up with that conscious reasoning in the past of like trying to predict the outcome of what's going to happen in the game. And then finally you reach a point where you're like, I don't know what's going to happen in the game. He doesn't know what's going to happen in the game. No one knows what's going to happen in the game. And that only happens through extensive practice of certain disciplines. For me, it's like meditation and breath work that help me just get into that state of feeling, that state of flow. I think I've always had a rather strong sense of intuition. Like I've always trusted my gut. I mean, you look at, I go to the University of Oregon and I start 50 plus games and then I transferred. And honestly, I couldn't tell you why I transferred. People ask me that all the time. Well, if you played all the time, why'd you transfer? I mean, I know that I really didn't see eye to eye at all with the coaching staff. And I've always been someone who I hold my ground. Like I believe in what I believe in. And yeah, I'm adaptable and open-minded, but at a certain point, I don't know. I tend to not conform. And you got to take that where it leads you, because it's part of my intuition. So anyways, I transferred not knowing. Dude, I go to Chipola Junior College, a town of 5,000 people. Literally called the coach, Jeff Johnson. I was like, hey, I want to transfer there. He goes, okay, what side do you hit from? I said, left. He knew I went to Oregon. Oh, okay, can you run? Yeah. Where do you play? Shortstop. Okay, yeah, we'll take you. I go down, first night, my mom and I are eating out of Chili's, and I bawled my eyes out. I cried. Because I was like, what the fuck did I just do? Like, I just left Oregon to come to this town, 5,000 people, and that 1,000% is my intuition taking me there. I didn't understand it at all. I mean, now I'm pushing 2x4s on the ground, doing jumping jacks on crabgrass. And then lo and behold, and talk about that delayed gratification, go through that whole season, win the state tournament, lose the first game of the national tournament. And what did I mention earlier? That was the state of flow that I recalled upon. We went and won the national championship, and I won MVP of the entire World Series. MVP, hitter of the tournament, defensive player of the tournament. Like, I took home every award there. But it was you think back all the way to crying at a Chili's in August because you're like, what? I'm like, what did I just do? And then now looking back, if I could have gone to Chipola for 4 years, I would have. Then you fast forward to Pro Bowl, and I go play independent baseball, which is essentially the JUCO of like professional baseball, no rules. So they let me do whatever I want. That was the most enjoyable experience probably I've ever had playing baseball. I got to do yoga on the field by myself with no shirt on. I got to show up to the field with sandals, tank tops, whatever. Who cares? You're literally playing a sport that's on dirt and grass. And you're going to show up in what, a suit? You're just going to take it off 2 minutes later when you get to the locker room. So anyways, I get picked up by the by the Royals. And the season starts and I get sent to high A and I start wearing like sandals to the field and tank tops, and quickly they shut that down because the reasoning was it's not professional. But we're playing literally on dirt. I'm in Quad Cities, Iowa, and I got to walk to the field with a collared shirt on. And that's a bit of just like the nonconformity that I've kind of always rolled with. And I've just come to the point where I'll accept wherever that takes me because, I mean, that's just like not rational thinking in my head. You know, and then I'm watching the NBA Finals, and I'm watching guys roll up in, I mean, I don't know what some of those outfits are, but there's not a lot of sleeves going on. I see a lot of toes, but that's not professional. I don't know. It's just that's just where I'm on my soapbox right now. But I think it's a valid point. You know, you always gotta. I've always thought of myself as a leader of sorts, and whether I think less through like verbal leadership and more through just like action based. And I think like as a leader of anything, you know, I'm watching the College World Series right now. As a leader of anything, you have to be tuned in to the whispers that are behind you from the people that are like that you're leading. And the whispers, you have to choose whether to take action on them. You have to choose whether to ignore them or whether to acknowledge them. Sometimes the whispers are super valid and it's like, oh, maybe I do need to like shift how I'm doing things, you know? And so, you know, we'll work with that. And I guess I'll finish today with just a story, just a great story. This is one of my favorite. Okay, 2023, I'm in AA with the Royals. And, you know, we're in Arkansas. It's hot in Arkansas. If you've never been to Arkansas in the summertime, it's hot. Okay, so I'm not playing a lot at the time, which is fine. My whole career, I always had to grind my way in. I always did. Always have. And I'm not playing a lot. Okay, well, the way that professional baseball works, when you're taking batting practice, groups 1 and 2 are the starters. Group 3 is the non-starters for the day. Okay, valid. So when you go play on the road, you hit on the field second. Okay, well, you have less time after batting practice, between batting practice and the game if you're the away team. So typically it would make sense to let your starters hit, and then they can go inside whenever, you know, they need, because they're starting in the game. You want them to get ready and have the best opportunity to be fully rested and in an optimal state to play. Okay. So, you know, me and, you know, a group of 2-3 other guys that aren't playing a lot, we're always the last ones. That's totally fine, because when we do play, we want that same opportunity to go in. Now, here's where there was differing viewpoints. Is the manager for the team I was playing for was keeping us out on the field for the entire batting practice. So the starters had to stay for, even when the bench players were hitting. I mean, it's like 100 plus degrees with humidity out in Arkansas. And so, you know, this is going on, So, you know, a week goes by, I go into the manager's office, super respectful. I'm like, hey, as someone who's not playing a lot, I would appreciate, as someone who's not playing a lot, I don't mind if the starters, and like me and the bench guys, we don't mind if the starters go in, because we want them to be ready the same way that when we're able to be in the starting lineup, we want to have the opportunity to be ready. And he looked at me and was like, no, not going to happen. I said, why? He said, because I said so. Okay. So, a couple more weeks go by, and it gets hotter and hotter, as it does in the summertime. We actually had a guy had to come out of the game one day because of heat exhaustion. Okay. So I text the group again a couple weeks later. I'm like, hey, why don't we all go into the manager's office and just, the whispers behind the leader, if our manager is our leader, well, we're coming to him as a group and being like, hey, we would really appreciate, the opportunity to go in during batting practice so that we could get ready. The starters would. Okay. Well, manager gets word that I sent out this message. So now we're all called into the manager's office. This is not by our choosing. This is by him calling us in there. Okay, well, he rips on us for like 10 minutes about just who knows what. That, who do we think we are? Kind of just like old man yelling. All right. Well, he tells me to stay in there. Tells me to stay in the office. So at this point, I know that I'm going to get yelled at for nothing. But it's up to me to maintain my composure and just listen. And so, he sits me down. He basically asked me, like, who do I think I am? I should be lucky to be there coming from independent baseball, which I replied with, no, I just think that I've earned this opportunity to be here. Then he was just coming at me for, we had like an ex-big leaguer on the team, and we had an older guy, and he was like, they're the leaders, not you. And I was like, I never said I was a leader in any sense. I was just trying to look out for the guys that were starting, So just kind of, berated me for like 20 minutes, good 20 minutes, whatever. I wore it. I'll always be proud of how I handled that situation, because I just maintained composure the entire time. There's no reason to get worked up. What was I going to get worked up at? Okay, so we fast forward, probably 2-3 weeks. Manager gets a call from farm director. Farm director says, hey, we're going to let the starters go in during batting practice. So you can imagine that was not a fun announcement for the manager to make when he told everyone that the starters were allowed to go in by batting practice. And lo and behold, you know who was starting a lot of games at that point? That was me. And so that's just a little story on trusting your intuition. My intuition told me that what was happening was not optimal for players to perform at their best, myself and everyone else included, and there was an opportunity to change it. And, delayed gratification. It took quite some time, but eventually we got there, and the starters, they got to go inside. Trust your intuition. And so maybe we can I've told you a little bit about how intuition has led me to the right place. But, as I think about what could be the question for this upcoming week, I think the question should be something like, when is a time that you listen to your intuition and the gratification or the resolve came much further down the line. So not instant gratification. You listen to your intuition. You might have even doubted it in the middle of it because you're like, what am I doing? Like when I'm crying at that Chili's, I'm like, what are you doing? And then you reach that point where you're like, well, gotta buy in, So what's a time that you listen to your intuition and then down the road you got that like, that's why I trust myself, Yeah. That same manager that yelled at me is this old dude, and he used to always drink milk and eat Cheetos all the time. Eat milk, No, wait. Drink milk and eat Cheetos. That was like his staple meal. Milk and Cheetos. So, anyways, trust your intuition and maybe think back on a time that's like, oh, I remember when I trusted my intuition and I doubted in the middle of it, and then lo and behold, it worked out. Because it's always happening. It's always happening for you, not to you. Always happening for you. So anyways, I got to go to a Qigong class out in the park. First time. I went last week, but it was a holiday, so no one showed up. So hopefully this week's there are some people there. And that concludes this episode of A Thought Experiment.